A few weeks ago, I spoke with Katie Taylor from the Women and Children's Shelter of Barrie, and she explained how the pandemic has made issues of intimate partner violence more prevalent and difficult to address during the COVID-19 pandemic. But the shelter is currently sponsoring a new suite of programs aimed at promoting conversations about similar topics for teens, specifically dealing with systemic issues of violence, learned behaviors, and just learning and talking about what healthy relationships look like. They're tough issues and issues that might not generally be talked about, but it's prevalent in our country and city as we deal with human trafficking and an increase of intimate partner violence even amongst youth. PrevNet, a national research hub into violence prevention, estimates that between 10 and 30% of teens report being victimized by an online dating experience. And they estimate 20% have experienced violence by an intimate partner. And these issues far more affect women, trans, and non-binary people. A small percentage of teens who have experienced these kinds of violence rarely come forward. Barrie's Women and Children's Center wants to do just that, talk about it, promote conversation. Their new programs are aimed at bringing these issues out in the open. Through virtual workshops, partnering with schools, they hope to promote these conversations. And to chat about this more, here's my conversation with three staff from the shelter who are heading up these workshops and facilitating these discussions. I'll let them introduce themselves, and then we dive into the issue of violence and violence prevention amongst teens in our city. How they say talking about it is a first step in tackling the issue.
My name's Ashley General, pronouns she, her, and I'm the lead facilitator of the violence prevention program at the Barrie shelter.
So my name's Kayla Frunti. My pronouns are she, her, and I am the assistant facilitator for the violence prevention program.
And last but not least, I'm Janet, and I am a co-facilitator with the violence prevention program out of the Barrie Women and Children's Shelter, and my pronouns are she, her.
And some have called it a shadow pandemic. And that's the issue of like domestic violence and intimate partner violence during the COVID-19 pandemic, made worse by some of the stay-at-home orders and being physically like trapped in a space with someone's abuser. I was wondering, could you talk about how prevalent domestic violence and abuse is in Barrie and across Canada? And why is it increasing during the pandemic?
Yeah, that's a great question. Unfortunately, domestic violence is quite prevalent in our community. And it's what we would call a gendered issue in that it impacts women very differently than it does men. They're impacted at much higher rates. And in fact, there was a report completed by the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives back in 2019 that highlighted that out of 350 people who are documented in the city of Barrie to have experienced domestic violence, 83% of them were women. And the rate was even higher for those who had experienced sexual violence within our community, at 95% of them being women. So it's definitely an issue that we see in Barrie. And again, I'd like to just highlight that these are documented cases. There's plenty of people that are experiencing the issues that surround gender-based violence that aren't able to come forward. Yeah, specifically during the COVID-19 pandemic. So with kind of the isolation that exists as a result of being told to stay at home and not interact with others, those who are experiencing domestic violence have become more susceptible to being isolated, which is a huge factor in power and control of an abusive situation. It increases people's vulnerability, just the stresses that have kind of come along with the pandemic. And as a result, we have, through our shelter, seen increases in calls and attempts to access the facility. So yeah, it's definitely happening in the Barrie community, unfortunately.
As you say in the promotional materials for these youth violence prevention programs, it's prevalent within the community of teens as well, sexual violence and relationship-based violence. Could you talk a little bit about that issue and what that looks like? Because it seems like that might be something that a lot of adults might not know about or might not think about.
Definitely so. actually, the Canada Public Health Services put out a statement stating that our young population, ages 15 to 24, is a vulnerable population, and those that are experiencing dating relationships and intimate partner relationships are at the highest risk for experiencing violence within those relationships as well, which is a surprising statistic, given that it is more prevalent in dating relationships and young relationships than it actually is between spouses for those individuals like older in age and in established relationships. So sexual violence and relationship-based violence definitely exists in our youth population. And it is something that is difficult to talk about. It is a sensitive issue, but I would always encourage people to speak up, address any injustice as it's occurring, stay informed, and the willingness to change our dialogue within these conversations, and the willingness to have these difficult and sensitive conversations with our young people, normalize those conversations. So violence prevention is up to all of us. We all have a role to play in violence prevention. And it is the goal of the violence prevention program, myself and my teammates, to start having that normalized dialogue and to inform our youth and to maybe potentially change the mindset so we can carry forward some positive social behaviors and social relationships, starting with our youth.
You said kind of it's a responsibility to kind of have these conversations, these hard conversations, and that's something that your group's doing. Why do you think so many people don't talk about this? Or why do you think this issue isn't in the mainstream conversation?
For a large majority of the adult population, because they are sensitive in nature, it maybe is difficult to have those conversation starters. And maybe there is a lack of information with how to deliver these types of sensitive topics that could potentially be triggering. They're sensitive in nature. So there is a reluctance to have those conversations simply because maybe it's not normalized in their dialogue, in the conversations they have. So when we address youth, which is our goal, normalizing those conversations and making it quite commonplace that they are informed and empowered with information, it's that much easier to have those conversations. I myself as a parent, I can see how having sensitive conversations and broaching the topic to so sort of difficult and sensitive issues with a lack of information is even more difficult. So those individuals that are informed and empowered with information, those conversations are that much easier and become the norm. I think that because there is that sensitivity and that reluctance to have those conversations, because teens may reveal that they have been victim or they've witnessed it, then how to have those follow-up conversations so that our teens are very well supported, so that they're getting the supports that they need. I think that by having the dialogue and the willingness to have the dialogue starts the process to ending violence in our community here in Barrie. It is something that needs to be addressed, and with information is power, and that's what our goal is through the violence prevention program.
And about that program, it's geared towards teens, that the current educational series. And I was wondering, could you talk about the specifics of the program? Like, what is a violence prevention program? What does that actually look like?
So I can answer that question for you, Sam. So the Violence Prevention Program is an Ontario Trillium grant funded program of the Women and Children Shelter of Barrie. So the Violence Prevention Program is a community-based outreach and awareness initiative that supports youth through the ages of 12 and 18 years of age in the Barrie and surrounding area. So our Violence Prevention Program strives to offer educational opportunities for youth that shift the ingrained systematic attitudes and behaviors that perpetuate violence and discrimination in our communities. Our team is comprised of a lead facilitator who introduced herself as Ashley and 2 assistant facilitators, so myself and Jan. And we have some goals within our program. So our goals look like fostering values that support healthy social behavior and relationship development. We also want to explore how attitudes and beliefs about oneself and others are formed. We want to develop critical thinking abilities that provide the skills necessary for youth to make positive lifestyle changes. And we also want to provide youth a safe and non-judgmental environment where they feel empowered to share their thoughts and ideas and express their feelings. Ultimately, our goal is to equip youth with strategies to help end violence and abuse in our community, and then perhaps, expanding that further and, hopefully worldwide.
Yeah, and you mentioned, Kayla, like the systemic attitudes and behaviors that perpetuate violence and discrimination. Could you give some examples of what are some examples of the systemic behaviors that kind of increase the risk of violence down the road?
So systemic behaviors and attitudes are, I think they look different for everybody. I think first and foremost, it's becoming aware of the prevalence of domestic and sexual violence. So whether that's in your community, in your life, with others that you know or care about, and then ultimately the inequality that comes from those behaviors. We talk about in some of our presentations, or our topics are based on the prevalence of rape culture. So it can be seen in media, many of the songs, movies, TV shows that many people may be watching or listening to. They promote rape culture without even knowing it, right? Even things such as clothing brands, alcohol, advertisements. Unless you really look into it or you learn about it, you'd be amazed where rape culture is advertised. We also touch on gender stereotypes. So that for sure is a systemic attitude that, everyone, in my opinion, everyone's just starting to get comfortable with 2S LGBTQ2+, right? So, and then there's human trafficking, which is a huge issue in our community and worldwide. And it's something a lot of people don't know about, or they don't want to believe is happening, right?
So it's almost like educating people is like the first step, like being aware of the issue might kind of motivate change kind of down the road.
That's the vision, I would say, right, ladies? So knowledge is power, right? So knowing what these issues are, what they look like, and then, what can you do to take a stand and make a change with that, right? How to really not follow suit, right? We're all free to make our own decisions and choices, but we want youth to make good choices and lead healthy, empowered lifestyles.
What's been the community feedback from teens or parents or anybody interested in these sessions?
I could speak to that. We've just finished launching 2 weeks worth of a virtual online series of the violence prevention program. And we through these virtual sessions, we spoke to presentations on relationship dynamics and violence, sexual violence and rape culture, as well as gender stereotypes. And the feedback that we had from the community members that had attended was very positive. A lot of the community agencies that we had connected with, parents who attended these sessions, some of the youth as well that attended, and different other community members provided us some pretty positive feedback. We're really happy to kind of get us rolling. We're in the midst of beginning a pilot project with the school board as well. So hopefully in the near future, we'll be able to speak a little bit more to that. So we are new to sort of beginning this process with all of the challenges that COVID has presented in trying to make this program in a virtual way. But we're well on our way. And so far, there's been a lot of great things that have come from the sessions.
Aside from encouraging their kids to attend these sessions or their teens, what role can adults play in helping prevent domestic abuse and sexual violence in the lives of their own children?
say modeling excellent behavior, having the willingness and to have those conversations, and to really encourage our youth that they service, whether it be a parent or a community member that is helping to support youth in other avenues, really encouraging them to speak up and call it out when they see it and address it when the injustice is occurring, have the courage to do that. And the willingness to adapt and change our dialogue and normalizing these conversations, like I had said before, really calling it out and encouraging them to be informed, and to the willingness to maybe have a mindset shift, to have that self-reflection, and encouraging our youth to have that self-reflection piece to maybe address and call out anything once they've received appropriate information. Our job, our goal is to deliver information and to give them the ability to have the knowledge to call out what it is that they're seeing, identify it, process it, and then hopefully adapt and implement a mindset shift carrying forward throughout their lives and through adulthood to break down the barriers and to address violence that is occurring in our relationships and in our lives. I think that as an adult, that it is helping support our youth, modeling that behavior, and really being someone that they can empathize with, calling out the behavior, addressing any injustice, and really encouraging the fact that violence prevention starts with all of us. We all have that role to play, and encouraging them to be empowered and take a stand.
Ultimately, we want adults to be teaching kids and helping to work with schools and community partners like ourselves to teach teens about what does a healthy relationship look like, and be able to identify abusive situations when they're happening. Without those basic skills, it will be very difficult to put an end to domestic abuse as the future moves forward. We need to have those very basic skills in order to do that. So ultimately, that's what our program is aiming to do, and to support the youth in our community to do. So yeah, like Jan mentioned, there's lots of other pieces, but that's the foundation of what we're here to do through this program.
We would also encourage adults and even youth to, we have our crisis line, which, is 24/7, 365 days of the year. So we could, listen and direct you to the appropriate resources. We also have our website. So there's the barrieshelter.com. If you go /VP, you get all the information we have online about our program. And then we have a bit of a social media presence on Instagram. So anyone can really follow us on that. It is mainly gauged for the youth, but of course we're welcome to any followers and feedback that would come through that. So yeah, there's tons of resources out there. So I think reaching out too, I just wanted to add, is the most important thing too, because I think Jan touched on it. It's kind of taboo, some of these issues and these conversations, right? So just getting more comfortable and having the knowledge for anyone is going to empower us all.
And I was thinking, from my experience, when I was in high school, a similar kind of situation, if you have a friend that you think is in an abusive relationship or in a dangerous situation, but you're really hesitant to speak out or you're not sure what to do, what advice would you and the team give that person? What should they do?
Ashley, if you want to, go ahead.
I was just going to say that ultimately what we want to encourage youth to do is to find a safe person that they can talk to, whether that's a parent, a teacher, a community support member, as long as it's an adult in their life that they feel they can confide in to have these conversations with. Because I think that is, a big way that we can support our youth with overcoming some of these very real experiences. Relationships look a lot different in this day and age than they once did, even 10 years ago. So, there's lots of challenges that some adults might not fully understand, right? But we need to be able to be supportive and and recognize that we have a youth coming to us with a situation that they're feeling uncomfortable about, then we need to take these things seriously, because when we kind of when we don't pay attention to those conversations happening, it's when we sort of are silencing those that are trying to come forward with these real issues that are happening in our community.
Yeah, and once again, our crisis line is there, right? So you can call us, have a conversation. Generally we would see, are those warning signs there? Are those unhealthy behaviors there? And then once again, do our best to assist in the situation and refer to the appropriate resources. But I think Ashley hit it on the nail. The first step would be reaching out to any trusted adult, just so that they can gather that information and assist that individual, right? Let them know what the next steps are that they should take.
Yeah, it sounds like a major theme is talking about it, just bringing it out into the open, and then that's when people can come together for solutions and learning. And I just wanted to thank you all so much for speaking with me. And lastly, just leave the floor open to you. Is there anything I didn't mention that you think would be great to talk about?
Yeah, ultimately, our goals are to support our youth in having a better awareness and understanding of the issues that are happening in our communities and the ways that they can be empowered to help to facilitate change.